kids. So
we'll go ahead and get rolling. And nice small group is good. We can have discussion if anything pops up that you'll have questions on. But thanks for coming. I appreciate everybody taking the time. I know that everybody's busy. It's only going to get busier this time of year with the kids and their skiing and riding. So my name's Sean Nolting. I'm the athletic director for the Winter Sports Club. Arrived here in June and really excited to be here working with the club. Excited for the opportunities that we have working with your kids. A little bit of background on me. The last 6 years before I got here, I was working out in Park City for USSA at the national headquarters out there. My role was sport education director, so my primary charge was to work with the coaches across the country in all the sports, all the different ski and snowboard sports, teaching coaches clinics around the country and working for a certification system there. We did club certification as well, working on making the clubs as strong as they could possibly be. When I arrived, I said I think we also need to make a greater outreach and effort to help provide information to the parents to help them understand our sports and the development behind those. And that was fantastic. Now I'm really excited to be in the club here in Steamboat, be able to do that directly and interact with you all, not just at sessions like these, but hopefully once the snow flies and we're out on the hill, I can get to know each of you a little bit better, along with your kids, so that we can all work together to help your kids have a great experience at Winter Sports Club. So that's what this is all about. And I know that as parents we're busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come out, and because it's a big investment for your kids in the program. And so I think as parents, we play an important role in supporting our kids. The coaches play a big role, and I work closely with them every day. But we work together to make it a great experience for our kids. So you're taking the time here means a lot to me. I'm in it with you. I've got a couple kids in the program, the U12 and a U14 Alpiner. And hopefully they're going to find an extra day to sample some of the other sports. We're working on that. So I'm in it with you. These things, I think that being a sport parent is not easy. Things that we naturally feel inclined to do aren't necessarily the right things for our kids. So coming to something like this, hopefully I'll give you some tips that'll help you have the right perspective so you can really, with your kids, support them in what they're doing. I always like to start with the club's vision and mission. That is to inspire the pursuit of excellence and empower members of our community to achieve their personal goals in athletics and in life through participation in sport. If we do this really well, they learn these great lessons. Our focus today is on long-term athlete development, so it's hitting that first part. How do we help them reach their goals in athletics? And I'm curious with this group, think for a second, why do you think your kids participate in programs? Why do they choose to ski or ride? And to that next level, do it at any kind of competitive or organized level like they're doing with the Winter Sports Club. Do they have aspirations of competing at the highest levels in the sport? Be it Olympics, World Cup, X Games, or compete for a college team, or are they just getting their feet wet into it? Not really sure what the future holds. Enjoying the moment, enjoying being with friends, doing it really for a social primary purpose, or just to be more confident around the mountain. I'd be curious by a show of hands, how many of you have your youngest child is 8 or younger? Just by a show of hands. How about 10, 9 or 10 or younger? 12, 11, 12 younger. How many of you have a high school age athlete? Okay. All right, so we've got a good mix in here. And we're going to talk about all the phases in there. And so I'm going to hopefully put it together so there will be some things that you'll grab for the young kids. There will be some things that you grab for the older kids. A lot about long-term athlete development is doing the right things at the right time to help them with their future goals. And the future goal does not have to be that top level. It's really important to us here at Winter Sports Club as a community program that we've got programs for the kids that are at that more recreational level. They just enjoy doing it. They want to get better. They want to be with friends and have a good time. Being better's got to be a part of it. That's what we're here for. But that, you know, so they don't have those aspirations and dreams of competing at the top levels. At the same time, as you're seeing a parent presentation like this with us at Winter Sports Club, compared with some other sports like soccer or football or volleyball here in this town, at the Winter Sports Club, we're a bit unique in that there's that direct link right on up to the national teams. We're smaller sports in the ski and snowboard world, and we're at one of the best places in the country to develop ski and snowboard athletes. One of the best places in the world, frankly. So we have that opportunity. So sometimes I'll get caught up and I'll be talking, and certainly I want to give perspective, because some of you have kids who do have aspirations to be at that Olympic level. We look around in this hall and we see the Olympic flags, and we know there's a heritage here in Steamboat. That's fantastic. We want to make sure that we deliver for those kids, but we also are delivering for the kids that don't quite have those aspirations yet, because there's so many meaningful things they can get out of their participation over here. So think about why your kids ski or ride, and I'll tell you that a lot of their focus, they may have this long-term vision, but most things in their world are going to be in the moment. So we're talking long-term athlete development today. We're not necessarily talking in the sense of what the kids are looking for in the moment. So understanding this will help us keep them a bit better focused with their perspective. So what kids tell us they want from us in sport: support and encouragement. That's our role as parents, is to provide them with support and encouragement, regardless of their results or their performance. To let them know that we're proud of them. Very, very important. Watch them do what they're doing out there. These are great sports to watch because they can do amazing things. To praise them for their efforts when they do something well that's in their control. To understand their sport and show interest and be involved. So you're all hitting that out of the park tonight. Thank you. And to have realistic expectations of their abilities, and we're going to talk a lot about that here, so that we can support and encourage them based on what they're doing at the right time. So long-term athlete development, that's our focus. I'll give you a kind of scientific definition. A researcher by the name of Ismail Bali up in Canada, who's kind of the founder of this movement, I could call it. And basically it's a compilation of sports science that we've really learned a lot in the last 20 years about kids in sport. It's a hard thing to study and research, so we continue to learn more. But he'll define it as optimal training, competition, and recovery program with relation to their biological development and maturation. So that's one aspect. But that's pretty out there. That's maybe more relevant for our coaches. For me, what I'm looking at is an individually based, age and developmentally appropriate approach to training and competition that leads them to their full potential in the long run. Their full potential is dictated by a lot of things. One of the biggest drivers for me is their passion, their motivation. Those kids that have that commitment. I want to make darn sure that as a parent and that our coaching staff is not doing things that's going to take anything away from their full potential in that process. So it matches their goals. We look at kids as individuals, and we'll talk about how kids the same age might be very different, and as parents we approach them differently, and as coaches we're going to do that as well. One of the things that long-term athlete development helps us understand is we see this is a 7-year-old alpine racer out of the Midwest. This is when I first came on to USSA. A coach that I've worked with out there for a long time sent me this picture. This kid was blazing at races, beating kids 5 years older than he, and doing a phenomenal job creating some angles that were amazing. What do we do with an athlete like this? Is this athlete on the path? Do we do the developmental things that will get him to the top of that podium as a 10-year-old in the short term? Are those the same things as what we might do for a skier like this, who, this is a 9-year-old, not nearly the substantially great angles, and probably somebody that we all might watch come down the hill, and we're not going to watch more than a couple turns or turn the other way. Anybody have any idea who that athlete would be? That's Ted Liggett, the youngest male gold medalist in American history. So I think that the things that this skier might do to get on a podium in the short term are different, and in some cases substantially different than what we do if our focus is a lot further down the road. In fact, Ted never saw that podium at that age. Doesn't mean those kids on the podium at that age are that's a bad thing. Of course, it's a great thing, but there's more to the equation. So we want to understand it better. We can look at rankings a little bit too. We can, in Alpine, we can look at TED, and these apply across different sports. There are plenty of examples. We've got Lindsey Vonn there on the right, 60th in the world already at 15 years old. Michaela Schifrin was actually 43rd in the world at 15 years old. She's now had such great success. TED was, I mean, if your kids, their first year of FIS racing in Alpine, we've got a lot of kids in the program with better ranks than that. So the rankings don't give us the full picture. We need to know more. It's not just race results. So at USSA, and I've got some on the back table there for each sport. For each sport, we came up with what we call the USSA training systems. And this is a roadmap, kind of a blueprint for athlete development for ski and snowboard sports, based on the principles of long-term athlete development. What do we do at different phases to help those kids reach their full potential? And if we look at it a little more closely, and here's an example of the snowboard training system. Each of these are built upon 6 phases of development that we can identify. The thing that's unique about this document, well, there are 2 things. First, we worked really hard to capture everything on one page so that we could digest it, and you all as parents could digest it, coaches could digest it very easily. Then in coaching clinics and things like that, we expand it broadly within each of the boxes behind each of these phases with what we're doing. But we can get a picture, a snapshot real easily. The phases are a factor of 3 things. They're a factor of their age, how old they are, but that's not the only factor that we look at. We look at biological age. Where are they in their physiological development? We've got early and late matures, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. And also, how many years have they been doing the sport as factors? So if we take those things into consideration, we can work down those columns and find the things that we should be working on with those kids. And we layer those progressively on top of each other, and we're building that right foundation for each of those athletes. Some things for you all, as you look at this chart, will be are simple things like how many days per year should they be on snow to be on track with those top athletes in the sport. As standards, how much of that time should be spent in a competition environment versus just out free skiing or snowboarding, those types of things. Competition ratios, we'll dive into it a little bit more. The basis behind this is some of the sports science research that I talked about, where we found that there are certain windows where if we focus our training in certain areas, we can make very rapid gains with the kids. So we try to maximize these windows to get the best effect. Just to familiarize yourself with this chart, so this would be an average rate of growth for females up here. The solid line, the solid blue line would be the average rate of growth for males. They hit their adolescent growth spurt. At the peak of that growth spurt, we call that peak height velocity. And that's a trigger for some changes in their bodies that allow them to adapt to certain training better than others. So we can map that out. These are averages. All of our kids are going to be a little bit different. Their growth curve here tends to look quite a bit like their parents. So if we say we had a little earlier rate of maturation, we hit our peak here a little bit younger, our kids are likely to have the same thing happen, or if we were late. Some kids will have a long and slow growth spurt. Some will have a very steep growth spurt and drop. But the average age for girls to hit that peak is 12, and for boys it's 14. But if we look at a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old athlete in age class competition, some of those kids are really in a 16 or 17-year-old's body. Some of them are still in a 10, 11-year-old's body physically. That has implications in terms of their results in competition, but also how we train them, and we need to help them understand those. At the end of the day, all of this in the long term isn't going to matter if we as parents and coaches take advantage of these windows. And I'll talk about how we can do that a little bit more. If you overlay that chart with the training system, these are the 6 phases in those training systems, and there's how that growth curve kind of lines up. And you see these windows for girls, for example, this motor skills window. This is a big one that we talk about. Motor skills relates to the kids and how they move, how their agility, coordination is, and how their sport movement skills, how proficient they are in those areas. And from about 8 years old, both boys and girls start to make rapid gains here because their bodies have gotten to the point where they can make good adaptations, and their brains are good enough that they can listen to instruction and relate that to get better. So they start making rapid gains, and then they hit that growth spurt. And all kinds of things are going on. Their levers change. The growth starts in their extremities. So all of a sudden, you'll notice when they're about to hit that because all of a sudden they're outgrowing all their shoes and their hands are getting bigger. And then that growth starts to move from the extremities towards the center. But when it starts, their lower leg starts to get long. Kids that have a really fast growth spurt, they can really lose coordination because their levers just changed over their skis or their board. And it really changes their technique and those things. It can be really difficult for that period because our sports are really technical and challenging on that. But it's short term. They get through it. But that window of motor skills is really important for us to develop the kids' fundamentals. Habits that they learn during that period tend to stick with them for a long time. My wife has worked with development level alpine skiers for years, and she used to attend an international children's competition up in Canada where the best skiers, the best few skiers in the country at 13, 14 years old would go compete. And then she'd be at upper level racing events for high school age kids in Colorado, and a kid from the east that she wouldn't have seen for 4 years since that event, she'd see him come over the knoll, she could recognize him right away based on their technique that she saw at those events when they were 13 years old. It's because these habits they learn in here tend to stick with the kids. So we really push our coaches to spend a lot of time mastering those skills at that level. That's a big one. For our Nordic athletes, that stamina window is there in that growth period is a time where they can really develop their aerobic capacity. It's important for all the sports, but particularly in cross country and Nordic combined. And then we look at the strength window. And when we look at these windows, for example, we start to see strength gains for the girls right after peak height velocity, 12 years old for the girls. It's younger than the boys, and it's kind of counterintuitive when they have this window to adapt to strength training in a good way. Well, we can't start strength training there because if we did, we'd have to teach them the proper movement patterns to handle that weight that they can take on. So we actually try to work with them, and any of the kids that did Fun Fit or Dry Lands here in the summer, they worked on those movements so that when they hit this window, they can start to gradually add weight, but see those good gains from it. So we use this information to plan our training, and we try not to get ahead of ourselves with a lot of it. So but hopefully this helps you understand some of that underlying thinking. For the boys, one of the differences that you see is the boys generally start that growth spurt later, so they have a little longer time in that motor skills window. one of the advantages that they have in our more technical sports. Their strength window is also pushed back later from peak height velocity. That's where they really gain muscle mass and make big gains in the strength that they're working with. Again, we'll work with them in strength at younger ages, but we don't push the weight so early. So those factors go into play in the training that we do. Here's an example in alpine skiing. We look at the number of training days, but also the breakdown of how much of that time should be in a free skiing environment. For U10s, about 90%, that blue area would represent free skiing time. Free skiing would be anything that's outside of gates. It could be anything from directed drills and exercises with the coaches to just directed skiing around the mountain with a task to the kids really taking the lead and skiing the mountain. A lot of skiing, a lot of action at these ages. And the reason that type of training is so important at this level is we really want a diverse background of fundamentals as they start. These are recommendations from USSA and the US ski team. As they get to U12, we've shrunk that a little bit, but still 70% of the time in that blue spent with free skiing. That's important training time. That's training outside of the competition environment. Some of our other sports, it would be similar in freestyle with the amount of time spent in that competition mogul lane. You're going to be skiing around the mountain more, working on both groomers and some of their carving and edging skills, and then also different types of mogul lanes. We equate it with our cross-country skiers, that they're doing a lot of exercise, agility, balance, those games of soccer on their cross-country skis, those kinds of things. These types of activities that aren't the specific competition prep are really important at these ages because of their contribution to developing the kid's base. U14, we're still, for a lot of kids in that window before puberty, or they're just starting that growth spurt, so we still have a greater percentage of time spent in that free skiing environment. It's getting more directed here, but these things are still important to see those number of days and how they grow. Now when we get to U16, we've got a really solid base at this level, and that time is shrunk. We're spending a lot more time in that competition environment. This is one thing that parents often have a lot of questions about. Our kid is in a racing program. Why aren't we in the gates more often? Well, it's about developing those fundamental skills that they can apply to the gates so they have good habits. So at this window, now when they're past puberty, they're past that difficult hump with that awkward stage, and they're able to really have the strength to sustain high-intensity competition training. We can do a lot of it because we don't have to take them back out to work on their skills. So that's spelled out in those training systems, and I think we try to follow these recommendations from the national team in our training. Competition is also an aspect to focus on. How much competition do we do? Competition at all of our levels is a great opportunity, and kids can learn a lot of good things from competition. There are also a lot of things that we as parents, coaches, and the kids can mistake from their participation in competition. They read the wrong things out of results, the scoreboard, which is pretty brutal in our sport. So how much competition is appropriate? Well, there are recommendations on those training systems. This is an example, again, from Alpine, but the point is, and you can see this across the sports, how we really start to ramp it up when we're post-puberty, when it matches the pie charts that you saw earlier there with that training. Again, we spend time building the base down here, U14 and younger. That's the primary goal. And then with those skills, we can really take off and enhance the competition. A great example, if you look at Michaela Schifrin, who certainly has taken the Alpine world by storm at a young age. At 14 years old, she competed in 11 races. And we've got kids at 14 years old that are doing 20 plus competitions. clearly the competition aspect wasn't necessary of that kind of structured competition for Michaela to achieve her success. Now, absolutely in training, she was exposed to some very competitive, difficult situations. But in training, the coaches were able to manage that so she could still get great volume. She skied 140 days that year. A lot of very deliberate practice and training. But it wasn't competition that was necessary. She still, in her mind, was preparing for future, something in the future. Now, she's extraordinarily mature in her approach. But one thing that's different about our sports compared with some team sports like soccer, and I'm coaching with the soccer club here as well. The soccer team, you get the game schedule, and you go to all and everybody's expected to go to all the games. You get the schedule, and that's your plan. As you get older in skiing and snowboarding, you enter into some different levels of competition where you can make some choices. You don't need to go to all those competitions. Understand with your coach, the coaches should work with you for an athlete management plan. Make sure you understand why your kids are going to those competitions. You don't need to go to every one to keep up with other athletes if it's going to take away from quality training time. So, as parents, at a more simple level, what can we help you focus on? There's a lot of stuff on here. You might not understand the sport. You don't need to be experts in skiing and snowboarding to understand it. But just if you understand the big picture, it's really helpful. Through phase 3, foundational skills and technique, those are the big, big things that our programs are going to spend a lot of time working on. Then when they hit that growth spurt, they've mentally matured by this point where we can start to talk about competition principles, where we start to work with them in their mental training a little bit to help them respond to what happens in a competition. Our young kids aren't prepared mentally for some of the consequences of competition, and so we need to help them out there. But we don't spend too much time on it down here because it would take us a long time to really get some of those mental skills down, because that's still too abstract for their age. Whereas to spend that time on their edging skills or their balancing skills or their movements on their skis, that's really valuable. We can get great benefits. So we don't spend a whole lot of that in there. We focus on it more there. And then we get more specific with competition skills as they get towards high school age. Even at a lower level, for us as parents, we can focus on that passion down here. Are they passionate about doing it? Do they love it? Are they excited to show up for training each day? If they are, fantastic. Are they putting in good effort? As parents, that's something we can focus on with them. It's under their control. And are they having fun? Because if they're not having fun, they're not going to continue at it. Because when you get later in there, some of those words like attitude and dedication, those are a bit harder. If it's not fun for me, I'm not going to persist and have that dedication. So we focus on these things at a general level that'll help our kids achieve. Too often we get ahead of ourselves, mainly trying to key in on competition too early. All pretty straightforward until we have this. What happens with our kids that are real early matures or real late matures? And how does that impact things? This was a podium at Junior Championships here in Steamboat several years back. 2 athletes the same age but in different bodies. We probably have a phase 5 athlete on the right and a phase 3 athlete on the left if we look at those biological phases, yet they're competing in the same competition. So what are the factors that we've got to consider here? Well, so for the early maturing athletes, if you've got that at home, early mature, be it one that's biologically at their age group, they have advantages in most of our sports early on. They get greater size. That's great. That's a great thing in alpine. If they can move it with strength, which they can gain earlier, and develop that stamina, that will improve their competition results, whether or not they worked hard for it or did anything to earn that benefit in traditional competition. nothing wrong with them, but we just need to be aware of that. So they end up with an easier path to success. So as coaches, we have to really focus on their technical fundamentals, because one of the disadvantages for those early matures is they were in that motor skills window shorter. We still work on those skills, but they're going to be harder, and it's going to take us longer to make those changes. And what happens often is these kids can have good early success, and so they don't feel like they need to do that work, or they feel like if we're asking them to do that work, then it must mean that we don't think they're very good, and from a confidence standpoint, they begin to lose confidence. So we need to be proactive here. Not let them rest on their laurels, continue to push, because early matures often will back off on their effort at the exact wrong time, and then when they get passed up later on, they can't recover from it, and they'll drop out. So we help them with that. We keep them focused on their work ethic. We expose them to some competitive challenges with athletes that are maybe more at their biological age level, so that 12-year-old that's in the 16-year-old's body. As coaches, we might, on some days, they're not 16-year-olds. Socially, they're not 16-year-olds. We're not going to school with those kids, that kind of thing. But we give them some exposure to push so that they feel like they need to continue to work to get better, keep providing that challenge. So for these kids, it's not getting ahead of ourselves. So as parents with these kids, it's helping keep them focused on effort and not getting too wrapped up in the results. Results are great if they're getting those, but keep them working. For the late matures, it's kind of the opposite. They're getting some advantage that may pay off long term for them because they're in that motor skills window longer. To stay competitive, they really have to, these are scrappy competitors. They tend to be very resilient when they stick with it, if they stick with it. And the challenge is, in some of our sports, these kids can get so far behind that the demand of competition is too great. They're not having fun at it anymore, and they drop out. And that's a shame, because a lot of late matures can really come around when their bodies get bigger and stronger. They can have great success, and it's very rapid if they stick with it long enough. Skiers and riders tend to be good athletes, so oftentimes they'll find another sport at school or something that they're good at, and because the disadvantage maybe isn't so great in those other sports, they'll choose to go that direction, when in fact they had great potential in skiing or snowboarding, but they just didn't realize it at the time. You add to that the relative age effect, and this is an interesting chart. And again, I did this research on alpine athletes, so I've got the best graphic for it. But in looking at other sports, I saw the impact as well based on their birth dates. So what we're looking at here is J4 and J3. That would be similar to U14 and U16 in the new terminology. At their junior championships, I looked at 15 years worth of podium data. These are the athletes that got medals at those events and what month they were born in. 73% of the kids at 12 and 13 years old that are on the podium at the top level events were born in the first half of the year. 68% for the 14 and 15-year-old kids at that competition. But if we take it all the way to the World Cup, there's actually a bit fewer athletes. They're in the top 30 in the world in any discipline that were born in that first half of the year. So there is a benefit to an early birth date in junior level age-based competition, but it's not long term. But we can think of the impact. If we've got an early mature born in January, they have a big short-term advantage that's not going to stick with them. If we have a late mature that's born in December, that disadvantage has been magnified, but it's short term. And with those late birthday kids, I always like to point out this fact: in 2010, not a single gold medalist out of 10 events was born any sooner than October 18th. That was an anomaly, but hey, we can't use this birth date as an excuse, but we do realize that it is a reality for the short term. I try to work with Where this really ultimately becomes a challenge is when there's selection methods, those kinds of things that are picking up from results that don't take this into effect. I'm trying to work with some of those systems to make sure we do as much as we can to minimize this effect. But ultimately, to me, and from a parent perspective or coach perspective, it's helping with our kids understand it's a short-term challenge. If we can overcome it, it'll situate us pretty good for the long term. But pretty interesting to see that, and we do see it in other sports as well. The good news is both early and late matures can be developed into that future champions. But our approach with them has to be different. We have to support them in different ways. One of the reasons it's such a challenge is because for kids, their perception of competence is different than ours. It's tied to motivation. If I feel that I'm good at something, if I feel I'm competent at it, I'll persist at it, and I'll work hard at it. But especially as a kid, if I don't think I'm any good, if I don't think I have that ability, I'm probably not going to work as hard at it. Kids tend not to understand, it's a little bit of an abstract thought for them that effort actually improves their performance. We expect that. We know that. Kids, that's an abstract thought, unless in our home we make a point about an effort-based message. If we work hard, it'll pay off in those down the road. But we have to understand that with our younger kids, that's still an abstract thought. So when they're in competition, they see results they're behind. They can really attach it to their ability, and it can lower their motivation, and that's a challenge. So results, we're a results-based society in general, but that's an adult thing for our kids. De-emphasize that with them. Don't talk numbers at the scoreboard, that kind of thing. Ask them about things that are within their control. One of the things at USSA that in the alpine world you've seen, in other sports you might, and if you haven't seen, you will be seeing, in the other sports this is being developed, this concept of Skills Quest. Skills Quest came about by coaches trying to figure out how can we know that competition results are driven by several factors that don't necessarily are not necessarily indicative of future performance. We also know that we really need the kids to focus more on fundamental skills at younger ages. And we need to reward them for it. We need to be able to track it, motivate them to do that, and reward them for it. So we developed a program, and it's a battery of different skill assessments that the kids can do to be scored on and learn about where they stack up with the skills. In Rocky Mountain Division for Alpine, they've been using it for quite a while and had some great results. I think it's really helped the kids improve. I'm working with the freestyle coaching staff here and at the national level with developing these skills for freestyle. I think cross country is the next one coming down the pipe that this is being built on. But it's basically coming up with a way to measure those skills and have the kids focus on those skills that will lead them to be faster in their sport several years down the road. In some cases, the kids take those skills and they're immediately faster in competition. In a lot of cases, that response or that benefit they get in competition takes quite a while. And an example of this, just to show you this chart, this is from a U16 national championship. And on the horizontal line was their rank in a Skills Quest competition. So how did their skills look? I realize this is a group of some of the top, these are the top U16 athletes across the country in Alpine. Their skills across the bottom, their ranking in the race in GS across the top, and the data points are all over the place. Okay, there's no correlation yet. There's no correlation yet. What we're doing here is we've got more information now for these athletes. We've got skiers up here. If we look at these skiers over here, these would be skiers that are fast. They're in the top 10, but their Skills Quest rank is in the teens and 20s. So these athletes all of a sudden get some information that, hey, I'm fast, but I've got some fundamental skills that I need to work on before it's too late. These athletes up here are slow relative to these other top performers, but they have good skill scores. That's a good sign for them. They probably, hopefully they're spending more time on their competition skills, but they shouldn't be discouraged perhaps by these results because their skills are looking pretty good. In fact, what we saw with the similar test that we've done many years ago for the girls, they did the assessment of results. So these are their scores down here on the results. And then we looked at their international points. So this is that look 5-6 years down the road from when they did the skills. And now all of a sudden the dots line up. So skills, so the idea with Skills Quest is it helps maybe give us a future look with their results into their potential. It just gives us more information. The boys were the same thing, they were all over the map, but we did the same type of thing. This was back in 2000, kids born in 1986, top kids in our project. Maybe not quite as good alignment, but we still see a more general trend where the skill scores down here matched up with their best ever FIS result. This top data point just happens to be Andrew Weibrecht, who's won 2 Olympic medals. Again, he stood out at the project with the skills. These were all fast skiers, but it gave us this future indication. So things like Skills Quest are just help us get more information. It helps that late maturing kid who's got a great skill set, maybe have something to hang his or her hat on, help them out. For that late maturing kid, as parents, we can help them find things where they can be successful to know that. Really what we're doing is when we look at the training system, we look at this, it's so hard for us as parents sometimes to keep the focus on, can we build the base? If our kids have aspirations to get up here and do really well, can we take the time to build a big base here? And oftentimes what we're really doing is we're building up and up and up, trying to have competition success in the short term. We get to the top of this pyramid, we look over at these guys back here, and we're looking real pretty because they're still on the first layer or two. But then we keep working at it, we put blocks on the top, and there's no place for them to go. They fall off, whereas these guys back here keep doing training, and their performance can continue to grow and grow and grow. As a parent, if I've got a kid who really has aspirations to do well in the sport for a long period of time, I'd like them to have this foundation, and I'll be patient with them as they work on that foundation so they can have that long-term success in sport. And some of us in the room, our kids might not know yet whether they have those aspirations. We're going to try to give them the tools down here at the bottom of that pyramid, so if they do catch that flame, they're going to be able to, they'll be on track to do that. If they flat out just want success in that next year, that training would look different. We put them in that competition environment a whole lot more, and they will get better at competition in the short term. And it's the challenge we face because there are other programs in Colorado that are doing just that. And it looks really good in the short term. But what we don't see is what happens further down the road in the longer term as we build that up for those kids. We feel like maybe we're getting behind, but if we think of these pyramids and where they're at, they're really just at the top of this little pyramid. We're building the big pyramid. So we've got to keep that in mind. So within the phases, I'll just try to walk through these phases real quick, and you can think of where your kids are and maybe some tidbits just so that you understand where we're focusing and where you can help the kids focus at each of these levels. And then we'll be wrapped up. So phase 2. Phase 2, these are our U10, U8 level kids. A lot of these principles we could apply to U6. I didn't bring up phase 1, that would be our 6 and unders. And really for them, it's just make it fun, make it easy for them, go out and have a good time, and it's all positive. At phase 2, we continue to have that passion and enjoyment focus. They've got to love it. Lots of positive reinforcement. Give them lots of encouragement for what they're doing. Praise them a lot for going out there in the cold or dealing with whatever they have to deal with. You can lay that on heavy at this age. So it's something that they really enjoy. What you're looking for as a coach here is very nurturing of them, and that brings the sport to life for them. We're going to spend our time working on their fundamental skills. That's the focus in here. The ABCs we talk about a lot: agility, balance, and coordination. And if you want your kids to be great skiers and riders, have them do activities at this level where they improve their ABCs. Whether it's a gymnastics program, other sports, those types of things serve as a great foundation for what we're doing in martial arts. The ABCs at this age are absolutely critical. We'll focus more on the team than individual results. The more we can do that, the better, because the kids tend to not be very good at judging their own performance relative to where they've been in the past. All they can judge is, last week Johnny beat me and this week I beat Johnny, so I must be really good. Or it's just peer comparison. So we try to keep it focused on the team. Cheer for everybody. Lots of skiing and riding time. We don't want to be waiting around. And competitions, we try to do a lot of just in the moment, as opposed to making a big deal of a competition day and really going through the motions of a competition day. We'd rather just hit the competition and get back to skiing or riding. So competition is great, we can do it, but it's just a check-in. We did that, we're off and doing something else again. It's not a big deal yet. As we move into phase 3, think here about your U12 type kids or U13s in freestyle. I wish we could all be on the same nomenclature, but we're not. But in that general area, say our 10, 11, 12, even the 13-year-olds, again, the priority we talk about is on motor skills. We're trying to develop their good movement habits and also have them versatile with those skills. One of the things that's interesting at this level, the kids can adapt and use skills that they learn from one sport and apply it in the other sport that they're doing very easily. If you or I go out and play some soccer and then we go try to ski, the transfer of the skills we learned from soccer into our skiing is not going to be so great as the kids at this level with that. So we keep them active doing a lot of different things. This means the same on snow. We have the advantage. We might have alpiners go out on cross-country gear. We might have mobile skiers hit the Nordic jumps. We might have the cross-country guys come up and try to run some gates. Those types of things at this level are really good. They carry over and they make their skill sets broader, and that helps them with that base. We try to really think about, instead of putting them in a mobile course down Voodoo, let's make the mobile course like we had on the face with smaller bumps, a little mellower pitch with that. Instead of putting them in a 5K classic, let's shorten that distance so they can compete with that same type intensity that they will be competing in the 5K later on. On an alpine course, we're not going to go full length in the new alpine venue just because we have it. We're going to do short sections in that so they can focus on what they're doing in that time. And the courses are going to be shorter, so the tempo's like what they're doing later on. So don't expect the courses to look like what you see on TV at the top level, because they shouldn't be at this level. We've got to make them kid appropriate so they can mimic what they'll be doing, those same movement patterns at the same time later on. So it looks different. This is a really important time for the kids. Phase 4, this is that growth spurt. This can be a difficult period for the kids, and again, we're typically running anywhere from 11, 12 up to 15, 16 we could with the kids. That awkward period of a growth spurt usually doesn't last more than about 6 months. But if your kid's about to hit it today, and it's going to last 6 months through the season, it might be a tough season, but it's short term. They're going to get through it. We've got to help them through that. We'll help them understand it short term. We'll really work on their technical skills still, but that progress is going to be much slower. So we spend more time because they've they're developed cognitively at this level and emotionally, that we can spend more time talking mental skills in the groups. We'd really like to see the kids take more responsibility for their equipment at this level too. That's another thing you can help develop. Yeah, you might prepare their equipment better than they do. You might know waxing and tuning those things better than they do. But let them work on it. Let them develop those skills so they can now start to understand how, when they make a change, how it affects their skis or their boots. Hand that off to them. Aerobic fitness is big in here. If these kids aren't active during their growth spurt, and doing some activities like hikes and bikes and those types of things at this level, they really lose out on a chance to improve their aerobic capacity, whether they're going to be a Nordic skier or not. It's an important window for that. They need to have patience. We have patience with them. The one other thing to think about, their identity with sport may change. So you think about the early mature, maybe now, the early mature, they really stand out in school. They feel a little bit awkward. They feel a little bit out of place. And they come up to the ski hill, and because they've gotten bigger and stronger, they're faster and they're gaining attention out there. And some athletes will really start to, because they don't feel comfortable at school, but things are going really good in their sport, they'll really narrow things down and start defining, and their self-concept, it will get too much built around their sport, in our sports. And we've got to be careful that they keep that balanced. On the flip side, some of the late matures start to feel pulled away sometimes because they feel they can't compete. And if they used to have that passion, as parents, I think we want to try to keep them understanding that, hey, that identity can still be effective and they still have that success. So it's got to stay healthy in here. It's a tough time for our kids, and they need a lot of support from us, and a lot of times they don't want to hear it, but if we give them that message, it's a whole lot better than the other messages we can give. Phase 5, a lot of our kids, as they're getting into high school, they're past that adolescent growth spurt, they're getting bigger, stronger, and if we've done things right, this is a really fun phase for them because they start to put everything together. And they spend more time in the competition environment. They start to do a better job of self-reinforcement. They're not so focused on the before, where last week I beat Johnny, this week Johnny beat me, so I'm not so good. They can say, last week, yeah, that happened, but I've really improved with my technique, or whatever that is, and it's going to pay off down the road. They can do that more at this level. Recovery for these kids is important. So if they're doing multiple sports, at this age, high-intensity training, there needs to be recovery built in, or they will overtrain and they will impact their performance short-term or sometimes even long-term. So prior to this phase, prior to that growth spurt, they're just going to be tired, but they can bounce back pretty quick. At this level, we really have to monitor those training loads. So good communication with the coaches. Our coaching staff will work with kids in other sports. We support that. But what we don't want kids is kids doing 2 or 3 different sports at the same time and being all in on all 3, because they're going to overtrain. So we'd rather adjust our training so that we can account for what they did in the mountain bike program or whatever that other program is. We really encourage the kids at this level to continue doing all the disciplines of their sport to be well-rounded. Phase 6, this is full maturation. These might be kids that are going into a PG program or all that. We get very specific at this level, but the thing to keep in mind is how often, I'm often hearing parents and athletes pushing to be training and doing stuff at this level when they're not here yet. If they do those things prior to this phase correctly, then when they do this here, they continue to see great benefit. When they haven't done the things prior, then we have to take a step back, and that's really hard to do at that point. It's hard to tell a kid that's done really well, and they get through high school, and they're looking at some big things in their future potentially, but they have some fundamental issues they still have to work through. To tell them to take a step back, get out of the competition environment, and work on these things. Because it's risky, too. They might not make the selection, whatever they're looking for. So, so things to think in mind for each phase. Overall, these are the principles that we're trying to live by. Be long-term focused. I think there's so much value not only in what the kids can achieve in their sport, but if we have this approach, you learn so much more. You get such a better life lesson and understanding out of it. There's so many things thrown at our kids that are out there for immediate gratification. Things like video games. That's a great example. There's a video game developer that told me that the key to making a good video game is that the kids need to be able to pick it up, and with 15 minutes they need to be able to get to the next level. So they can get that immediate satisfaction with it. That's not the way sport works, and esports especially. But that's the culture they're in. So boy, if we can embrace this and the kids embrace it, what a great life lesson. Every skier rider is unique, so hopefully some of these things helps you understand if your kid kind of fits outside that mold, to have a better long-term perspective. If you have questions, talk to your coach. You can come talk to me to help you out through this, but it's hard to do programming such that we recognize this, that we're really trying hard to do that. We believe every skier rider has potential, has great potential, but it's really incumbent on them. Their motivation is what's going to lead the thing. We as parents can't give it to them. We can make it attractive for them to do sport, but it has to come from within. We help them focus on the process of getting better rather than outcomes and results. I believe that training is magical with our good coaches. All those sessions are important. The free skiing or free riding sessions are just as important as those competition-specific days. They really are for their development. If we're doing it right for that kid that's committed. An athlete like Michaela Schifrin absolutely was getting just as much out of those days. She understood that. At the end, it's the journey they'll remember, so we can focus on that, and that emphasis on a strong foundation. If we stick with these things, our kids will do great things and hopefully have a really rewarding time at it. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those training system sheets on the back table. If we ran out of those, if you go to USSA.org, you can get them online. Just put in your sport training system in the search box. So go to USSA.org, put freestyle training system on that. It'll take you to the page where, in that search box, where you can find that. I don't know if there are any free skiing parents in here. You might be saying, where was ours? The free skiing one is in development. Tony, actually, our head coach in free skiing, was involved with me at USSA before I left. We were working on that, and we expect that document to be out here later this fall. So we were part of that build. But the rest of the sports have that developed. So take a look at that. If you have any questions, talk about it with your coach, your program director. I'm a resource for you as well. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
I actually have two questions. One is that for girls, you said that they can start strength training at 12. Is that like with weights?
So what that means, that window, once that peak in their growth spurt is kind of a physiological marker where now they can start, when they do strength training, hypertrophy begins. That means they're starting to add muscle mass, and as they add muscle mass, they can start to add load if their technique is strong. And for the girls, it's particularly tough because as girls go through puberty and that, their ligament laxity and other factors make them more susceptible to injury if they don't have that strength. So we always proceed with caution, but yes, the girls, because they can start to go through that adaptation, can start to build earlier than the boys. The boys, when they're making gains before they've hit that growth spurt, it's because they've gotten more efficient at the movements. But they're not adding the muscle mass in the same way. That's the girls.
And then my second question was the long-term athlete development. Where does that come from? to have a 10-year-old say, well, Mom, I really want to look into long-term athlete development because I want to be good when I'm 25. I mean, like, is that coming from the parents saying, you are going to be really good when you're 25, therefore, this is what we're going to do? I mean, like, how do you create that balance? You know what I mean? Like, did Ted Ligety at 15, when he was ranked 2600th in the world, was he like, oh yeah, I'm going to the Olympics? I mean, he must have been like, are you kidding? What am I doing? Like, how does that motivation?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, the concept or the framework of LTAD, I think, was really built around. It's not kids demanding this. It came about from sports scientists trying to quell this push in the professionalization of youth sport to do more specialized training at younger ages, and coaches making great money because they get great results with kids in the short term, and they make money, and then the kids would not have the skills to persist longer on. So it's not, the kids aren't usually craving, hey, what is this in there? But to use Ted as an example, Ted was frustrated with his results at 13, 14, 15 years old. Ted had that belief, absolutely, he had that passion. He wanted to be at the top levels, but he talks about how he's very frustrated that the guys kept beating him, but he kept fighting. And when he did, he was a little bit of a late mature, as he described it. He definitely hit those free ski percentages that we talked about. I mean, that was his thing. He talked about when they were younger that gait training was like this reward that you didn't get very often. So they were so excited when they got it. But the coaches did a really good job of the kids kind of had an appreciation for that free ski to do that. And sure enough, because he'd done those things, he didn't know it at the time, but he hit 17, 18 years old, and his results went through the roof. If you look at it, because he had all this stuff built up, he got through maturity, and everything kind of built on it. So his results came like, he was a good performer. He went to junior championships. He had some top tens, but he was way off the top guys in terms of times. It's not like he was back of the pack. But he always felt like he was a much better skier than the results showed. He would be a kid where Skills Quest would give him he'd be probably getting medals at Skills Quest and thinking that was pretty good. But he had that drive, he didn't need it. I wonder if there are other kids that maybe, whether they didn't have as much drive or maybe they were pressured to do other sports and those kinds of things that maybe didn't have that information like Skills Quest would have provided, so they choose to go to another sport when they have just as much potential. Right? I don't know. But it's hard to teach that and get that point across. But if we understand it, we've got a better chance.
Do you guys incorporate any type of yoga into the kids' training to help like with flexibility and offsetting of injury?
Not a lot. There's some coaches that might be doing that a little bit. And that's something that I think that there's always a chance to those types of things, body awareness, range of motion, are really good. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening in. Any parents that weren't here that you know, they're like, boy, you should have heard this. I did have it on video. Hopefully it recorded fine, and we'll be posting it here in the next day or two. You can send them to that link.
Thank you.
Yeah. See ya.
Thanks, John.
You texted me while I'm sitting and realized it was you.
Oh, I didn't even know you were